righty,
Well,
Ben.
yeah, why don't you just start out? Tell us a little bit of your background. Obviously, the people watching may not know. I'm relatively new to the company as well, so I've gotten to know you, a little bit over the last few months. But why don't you give me just a little bit of your overall background and how it led to kind of getting to this point?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with my relationship with sports. So I grew up in a family that, everyone played sports. I have two brothers. We all played hockey. My dad played hockey. My dad played football. So from as like I can remember, so I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and we would go skate on the lake. I grew up in a community called Mindapore, and I grew up across the street from the man-made lake that was created because Alberta doesn't have a ton of lakes. And there's a fence around it. And when the ice starts to freeze, I think it has to get to like 13 inches or something like that, where it's safe enough for people to go and skate on it. And I remember my dad pulling up a chain link fence that like encloses this man-made like community lake, sneaking me under, him climbing over, and us going and skating on the like frozen lake that would have been like around safe enough at that point. Um, uh, and so those are some of my earliest memories of playing hockey. So played hockey my entire life, played, at, higher-ish level. I won't say the highest level. Played junior. I went to a school called Notre Dame, which is a boarding school in Saskatchewan that's produced a whole bunch of athletes. Like while I was there, Rene Bourque and Curtis McElhaney. McElhaney won two Stanley Cups for Tampa. And there's a bunch of other guys that went to Notre Dame. My entire life, I've played pretty much every sport. Actually, with the exception of football, I played flag football as a kid, but football generally conflicted with hockey season. And so I've been very passionate about sports, been extremely passionate about fantasy sports. As when I was a little kid, I remember eating breakfast before school every day, like eating my cereal, reading the newspaper box scores from the night before to find out who won because not all the games were on TV. You didn't have the internet, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV at breakfast. And so, I became very much, and being kind of mathematically inclined, became very focused on the data side of things. And when I was a kid, actually, one of my family friends, his dad started one of the companies that did we called them pools in Canada, pool where you would kind of select at the start of the season one player from each box and you would send that in. It was driven through the newspapers. You'd cut out the newspaper, make your selections, put a check in, mail it to whoever ran the pool, and then you kind of follow along with your own team and see who's on the leaderboard. And it was posted once a week in the newspaper, and at the end of the year, someone would win. So that was my kind of, you know, relationship with sports. Now, from a professional perspective, I have a computer science degree. I went to a school called Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and my kind of my career started in healthcare. And so I worked on building. I was part of the team that built the electronic health record in Calgary and then Alberta. So I did that about 8 years, and I learned a lot about working in highly sensitive kind of industries. I learned a lot about building things at extreme scale, because you're building a system that needs to be up and running 24 by 7, needs to be extremely secure because you're protecting people's patient information. And we had something like 3 million customers. And when everything provincialized and went to Alberta, we had 110,000 employees that were in some fashion kind of relating to the clinical management side of things. So I learned a lot about that. And then, working in kind of a large, although it's not technically a government organization, but a large government organization in Canada, it was just too slow moving for a young kind of career-oriented individual. And so it wasn't as much of a meritocracy. And so one of my buddies that I met through another friend, but we played hockey together, he was a realtor, and he said, "Hey, why don't we start a company?" He's like, "I'm a realtor. There isn't really a lot of good technology in the space. I think we could build something that not only would help solve my own problem, but we could sell to others. So at that time, that was in 2010. No, that would have been, yeah, 2010. We went live with the product on October 10th, 2010. So 10, 10, 10. And it was originally called Opry, and then we rebranded it to Rippery, just because it had a little bit more. It was easier to spell and had a little bit more of a real estate slant to the marketing side of it. So we built that company up, and then in 2017 we were acquired by uh, another company where I became the CTO of the parent company, and then we had five products, et cetera, yada yada yada. Now, during that time, to help pay the bills while we were building Repre, started a consulting company. So that helped pay from, my personal bills because every dollar we were making from Repre was going back into the business, hire more people, continue to grow things, pay the bills. So started rolling wave and started doing consulting on the side to pay personal bills. And, as that continued to, as my name got out there, um, uh, more and more contracts were coming in and couldn't service them, and so didn't want them to go to waste. So I'd worked at AHS in Calgary Health Region with Jeff Robinson. So I recruited him to come and join, and then soon after recruited Josh to come and join. I met Josh at an event in Calgary, and he'd been working in the Salesforce ecosystem as a consultant. And so, although I was kind of the first one to start Rolling Wave, I really see Josh and Jeff as co-founders because they joined soon after, and at that point it became from kind of like an independent contracting outfit to a company with a few people involved, and we started to grow. So that continued to grow. Even though Repre was growing and kind of occupying more of my mind share. Jeff and Josh continued to kind of, grow the company while I was still involved, but less involved. And then when I left Next One, the company that acquired Repre, came back into consulting. And when I came back in, it was kind of an interesting point in time because the consulting business, I think at that time had grown. Um, I can't remember how there would have been like seven or eight people, I think, at that point involved in the company. And we were doing okay. And when you're in consulting, it's very much a cash business. You work hours, then you get paid for them, and you get paid well. And we did good work. So people continued to renew and bring us projects. And we kind of made the decision of, it's good to be taking that cash and stuffing it in your jeans, but it's more interesting if we kind of collectively pool our resources together and start partnering with other companies, investing in other companies. And, we started exploring the idea of building our own product, building our own, kind of company that we could invest our skills and expertise into, as well as some of our own cash. And that's how Rolling Insights was born. And so we played with, building a product in healthcare. We played with building a product in marketing automation in the Salesforce ecosystem. And we kind of resolved on sports as where we should be investing our time. So Josh has a sports journalism degree. He worked at covers.com. So he's got some experience in the industry. Jeff and I had not worked in sports at all previously, but had gone into industries we knew nothing about, and were able to kind of build up the expertise. And so this is at the time when, legalization was underway. There was a lot of dollars flooding into sports. And there was this perception that there would be data available so we could build a product. And so we picked sports and we said, okay, well, what is the thesis of this project? Well, if you look at it, there's data available, but as a fantasy sports player, as a sports bettor, or even just a sports enthusiast, there are not a lot of great tools to kind of go out and employ your own philosophy or your own strategy, your own tactics with that data. And this has kind of changed actually recently. Back in the day, when you would follow a content creator, they would have all this research and analysis that was very data driven. This is around in hockey where they were developing Corsi and Fenwick and PDO and all these derivative advanced stats. And being a computer scientist, I was naturally driven to those content creators. I find it interesting that some of that is actually has kind of stopped
Mhm.
evolving. And part of it I think is the fast consumption of short video content, short form content. Um, and so it was, we saw it as an opportunity of like, okay, well, we can go out and empower these content creators, give them tools so that they can go and use this data and monetize data as an asset because they're doing all the work. I can see them taking screenshots of their spreadsheets or we speak to content creators and they're doing all this number crunching behind the scenes and then sharing it in their short form content. But also then give the everyday fantasy expert, enthusiast, a tool they can go and employ their own strategies, as opposed to going and, using some of our competitors like Fantasy Pros, not a bad company, but very structured content. So if you don't agree with exactly how they've built that particular tool you're using, then it's kind of useless. Um, so even in my own life, whether it's sports betting, etc., I had spreadsheets for every single one of my leagues that I was updating on a weekly basis. And it was fine when I was younger, but now I've got a family, etc., more work commitments. I just can't be updating spreadsheets each week. So out of that, SportWise was born. So I'll stop there. I know I've been rambling for 15 minutes and see if there's any questions before I go into the next chapter of the story.
No, I think that was very insightful, and I think that for the audience, it's insightful too because anyone that is watching, like I'm lucky enough to have built up at least some semblance of, an audience in this industry. So I think anyone that's watching this because of, they watch my content, like this is very insightful for them because they probably don't even know that there's two sides of, rolling insights here. Like we have SportWise and then you have like the data feed side. Like they probably don't even know that this exists.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into how data feeds came about. So one of the first problems that we faced was okay, getting access to data, and not that we had a ton of money, ton of capital, but we had money, and we could go out and we could buy data. And whether we built our own collection engine and scraped it or whatever we were going to do, or go and pay for it, it made more sense to go and pay someone to provide that. So we contacted, I won't mention their names because I don't want to say anything bad about any specific company because we're all in it together. We contacted kind of all the brand names, and either the price was really expensive or it was like going up while we were talking. Maybe it was misunderstanding what we were buying. I'm not sure, but the price was going up, or we didn't hear anything back, or some of the quality of the data providers just seemed really low, like not achieving high accuracy, not really recent and relevant stat providers. So we met a company out of Minnesota, and they seemed to serve that specific purpose. Now, this is around the time the pandemic was ending. And so, unfortunately for them, right after we kind of I don't even think we'd even signed up with them. We were like in the process of signing up with them to be our data provider. And they informed us that they were kind of shutting down shop. And so we said to them, wait a minute, before you do that, let's talk. And so we acquired their assets, acquired all their engines, some of their existing customer base that remained because the pandemic was obviously very difficult for a lot of sports tech startups. And then that became data feeds. So, not only did we have SportWise, but we now had engines to collect the raw data, as an unofficial provider, and we could provide that to other startups and other companies. And the interesting thing, the thesis behind it was to solve the exact problem that we had with SportWise is we're not a big company, we're a startup. We're going to be in a development period before we make any revenue. How can we be that partner with those companies that were just like us when we were building SportWise? And out of that, data feeds kind of, we spent a lot of time investing in the technology side of data feeds so that it's very reliable and stable and self-serving. We've got, the API locker currently in the process of being released that will allow people to go in and sign up on their own. But we also developed the Breakaway Accelerator. And the intent of that is to take these early stage companies that are just like us, give them extremely competitive pricing while they're in the development phase, but also give them a bunch of other ingredients that are increase the likelihood they're going to succeed. So community with other startups. I know when I've built startups in the past, that community of even if you're in the same industry and you're competing with each other, being at the same stage, helping each other out is really important and instrumental. Providing them with some, advice and guidance from, our internal team members that have a lot of experience just through consulting and generally working across other projects to give them that advice and help them grow in some of those other areas. And then also give them a little bit of exposure as much as we can to, other companies that, other funders, investors, expert consultants, et cetera, partners that we have. So, for example, we don't have odds data, but we've got a lot of partners in the odds data. So we've been able to connect the dot our performance data with one of our odds partners creates, the right data set for one of our companies. So, it's been an interesting journey because, one of the things they say in the startup world is eat your own dog food, and we're chowing down.
Yeah, and that's something that the approach there in terms of like working with other startups is something that just I find so valuable given my background of working with startups too. Like I can appreciate that, and we're still in such an early stage of the sports betting industry, right? Like there's going to be so many, I don't even have raw numbers, but the amount of companies that probably started in 2024 and will be started in 2025 in this space, it has to be just a staggering number.
Yeah, we did a bit of analysis on that, not to share all of our market research, but there's between 1,000 and 2,000 startups just in sports being started each year. And so only a percentage of them will require, raw data, raw performance data. But that's not a lot. And if you take into account the number of, like, one of the beauties of the sports industry compared to other industries is that you can have a lot of mom and pop and hobbyist and kind of single provider type businesses. If you think back to when I was working in real estate, if you're a real estate software company, there's no mom and pop shops. You're either a company or you're not a company. And a lot of them end up dying off because they can't get past that kind of threshold. Whereas, in our industry, you could have a single content creator that's producing data products, with their own secret sauce, have their own following, and they can make enough money to live off it, live a really good life, and they can exist forever. The other thing too that hasn't happened yet and we saw this when we were at the Fantasy Football Expo, is there has not been a lot of consolidation yet. You're starting to see a little bit of it. There's some groups coming in and kind of buying up a couple of logos. But when you go, if I think back into real estate, when we started, there was, I think, 10 companies that were in the startup corner at this one particular uh, conference. I can think of one of them that was bought by, I think they were bought by Zillow. Yeah, they were bought by Zillow. There was another one that was bought by Dropbox. And of the companies that are there, we were bought by somebody else. Um, they've all been gobbled up and consolidated into a much larger company. And a lot of that hasn't happened yet. And there's some reasons for it, but I do believe that future is coming, that there will be, and in the meantime, until that starts happening, there's going to be a lot of, smaller startups, small, medium businesses duking it out, competing, thriving, surviving until that consolidation starts to occur.
Yeah, I completely agree that that's on the horizon. I guess like maybe my last big question for you would be where do you kind of see this going? Like where would if you were mapping stuff out very loosely in the next 3 to we'll say 5 years, like where do you envision this kind of the direction it's taking?
You mean Rolling Insights as a company or just the
Yeah.
industry as a whole?
Yeah, you can kind of go both, but I was more so asking specifically with Rolling Insights. Yeah.
Yeah, Rolling Insights, we're at a very, particularly with data feeds, we're at a very interesting point where we have, a number of customers who are living and breathing off of our real-time data. And so we feel extremely confident that we've got the technology in a place that it can support businesses. So what that means now is we now shift our focus to, you know, away from development. We're going to continue to develop new features, products. We're still investing in GraphQL. It's more developer friendly. So we're going to keep doing that. But really, the focus is now on, marketing and sales and starting to gobble up more market share and really being the number one player kind of below the fold of the big boys. So if you're NBC Sports, you're probably going to go to Sports Radar. You're not going to come to us. But if you're one of those startups that are out there that's building a new fantasy platform or you're building a new AI model, we want you to think of us first and come to us first because we're a friendly partner. We're technology first. Pricing is extremely competitive. And, even if some of those companies were to become really, really big and graduate out and have to go to official data providers, we would see that as a huge success, a great story that we can tell. But in the meantime, we want to be those companies' partners. So 3 to 5 years, we really want to be the first place that people start as they're building their startup, or you're a small and medium business that needs access to data. The second piece of it is SportWise, doesn't have as much usage as we would like today. I absolutely love the product. I know that my influence in how it's been built and how it works and all that is outweighed from the general public, so it's probably too slanted in my own opinions. But I absolutely love it. Like I use it for every single one of my leagues that's hosted on Yahoo or Fantrax. The leagues that aren't, I still use it to evaluate, waiver wire pickups and trades and all that jazz. I use it each week to place bets on uh, football in particular, baseball in the summer. I don't really bet on hockey, which I find a little strange. I think I'm too close to it. Um, it's too difficult to make decisions about hockey with the
Yeah,
data because
I'm surprised you're not a hockey bettor.
to be honest, I know that any night of the week, like anybody can win. So it's very hard. I'm very conservative in the way that I pick my bets. Like I'm less of a like a high stakes, I want a big return. I'm more of like if I can get, pennies on the dollar, I'm okay with that as long as I think it's going to be a sure thing. Um, I like it more for the feeling of winning, like picking the right winner, as opposed to, making a whole bunch of money. Um, and as a result of that in hockey, I end up, just continually just second guessing everything because I know all the players and I'm just too close to it. But it's probably something I should play with more now that you mention it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I use it for that. I also use it, for I live in Calgary, huge Flames fan, and I haven't posted much about it this year, but I use it to analyze the team as well. So one of the things that was interesting last year is you had all these old veterans that were being traded out, all these new guys coming in, comparing their performance, points per game, time on ice, this season versus last season. Because we have all that data in SportWise, you can really easily kind of create those data spaces and models. And then I love chatting about it on Reddit. So then, when you're in a disagreement or argument with someone, you can kind of share the actual data with them. So, longer term, I really hope that more people start using SportWise, content creators and fans alike, just because I get so much enjoyment from using the tool.
Yeah, and even in my short time here, I've grown because I had no familiarity with the tool whatsoever, when we met. So just even in my short time here, like I've had a ton of fun playing around with it, using it, on the live streams and stuff. I use it for my biggest league this year was on Yahoo, so I've used it quite a bit.
Thanks. I'd love to hear it. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of, where things going. When I look at the industry, just quickly to comment on that, there's a lot of similarities to other industries that have kind of opened up. A lot of cash come in. It goes into kind of the frontline revenue generation stuff first. So sports betting is obviously where, the market share capture went initially, and then, the reality sets in that not all these companies are going to make, big profits and generate large revenue. And so we're in, I think, kind of that phase now. We're coming off of all that investment, maybe the hangover of it. However, what it means is that you're going to end up with all the derivative products that come off of that now. So you're going to end up with more investment in content creation sites and advancement there. You're going to end up with more kind of obscure fantasy platforms, products, games, etc. You're going to end up with, particularly with the advancement of AI, predictive modeling, GPTs, generative, like all of that stuff is going to be the next layer on top of it. And I think that's where it starts getting really exciting because the obvious initial like flood of cash and to try to get as many people playing games and placing bets, um, that's not really that innovative. Like most of these companies have been around in some form or another for a long time. And but now the trickle down effect is going to start to occur, which I think is really going to be transformative for sports and fan engagement.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. I think that I think it's an exciting time as well, but kind of going on with what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. It's the whole entire industry. Like if you would have told me that we would be here when I first started doing content in 2017, I would have said no way. And then I would have had not only would I have not thought we'd be here, I never would have thought that we would even have like, legalized sports betting or anything along these lines.
Yeah. You probably thought you'd be working for a newspaper.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Or like a radio like AM radio, like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Which I do still love AM radio. I listen
No,
to
I
AM
do
radio
too.
every
It's
single
that's like
day.
my guilty pleasure. People think I'm
Yeah.
crazy, but that is like my guilty pleasure.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Sirius XM and AM radio.
Hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I have to jump to another meeting. But
Awesome.
hopefully
Yeah.
that's some good content we can snip up. And for those listening at home, always willing to have a conversation, chat with startups, companies, people even just, even if they don't need our data, just trying to grow in the industry. So feel free to
Yeah.
reach out to us.
100%.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you
Talk
for your
later.
time.